Some say President Trump's threat to totally destroy North Korea isn't just more colorful language.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
U.S. President Trump's remark to totally destroy North Korea if the regime threatens the U.S. or its allies has sent shockwaves in South Korea. While Trump is well known for his strong and non-conventional rhetoric, his first address to the UN is perceived to be extraordinary.
It wasn't expected that President Trump will come out with great rhetoric at the United Nations, but Trump's words reflected the strong will that the U.S. will not sit and watch North Korea's threat.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary.
A South Korean foreign ministry official cautioned against reading too much between the lines of Trump's speech and rather said the U.S. president underscored the need for the international community to fully implement sanctions on the reclusive regime. Experts are now speculating over North Korea's possible response to Trump's UN speech. As the regime has a record of hitting back aggressively at Trump's words. After the U.S. president threatened the North in early August with fire and fury like the world has never seen before, Pyongyang dismissed such warning as a load of nonsense and outlined plans to strike the U.S. territory of Guam in the Pacific Ocean.
It is time for North Korea to realize that the denuclearization is its only acceptable future. The United Nations Security Council recently held 2 unanimous 15-0 votes adopting hard-hitting resolutions against North Korea, and I want to thank China and Russia for joining the vote to impose sanctions along with all of the other members of the Security Council. Thank you to all involved, but we must do much more. It is time for all nations to work together to isolate the Kim regime until it ceases its hostile behavior.
A statement by South Korean President Moon Jae-in Wednesday referred to President Donald Trump's denunciation of North Korean behavior as portraying a firm and specific stance on the key issues regarding keeping peace and safety. It said Mr. Trump's remarks clearly showed how seriously the United States government views North Korea's nuclear program. Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said he believes it is necessary to have strong deterrence, and he highly appreciates the position that all options are on the table expressed by President Trump. Speaking for the first time as president to the UN General Assembly Tuesday, Mr. Trump denounced the regime of Kim Jong-un as depraved, showing contempt for both other nations and the well-being of its own people.
It is responsible for the starvation deaths of millions of North Koreans and for the imprisonment, torture, killing, and oppression of countless more. Now North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles threatens the entire world with unthinkable loss of human life. It is an outrage that some nations would not only trade with such a regime, but would arm, supply, and financially support a country that imperils the world with nuclear conflict. No nation on earth has an interest in seeing this band of criminals arm itself with nuclear weapons and missiles.
But Asian Studies professor Jeff Kingston of Temple University in Tokyo tells VOA's Victor Beatty the man on the streets of the Japanese capital would think this was not a wise speech to make.
Threatening Kim may play well for Trump's base, but in terms of productively addressing the situation, it doesn't seem to mark any progress. Of course, the governments of South Korea and Japan want to portray solidarity. They view the alliance with the United States as great protection for them. And so there have been huge differences, particularly between Seoul and Washington, on how to move forward on dealing with the crisis. But I think that if you look at a lot of Japanese, given the nuclear experience in Japan, Trump's threatening annihilation of North Korea don't go down well with people on the street. I think it's clear that the governments want to show solidarity and that they are united. The alliance is close, but I don't think, particularly in South Korea, that they think that Trump's position is a productive way to deal with the situation.
One North Korea analyst in Washington said that with those words, President Trump handed the regime of Kim Jong-un the soundbite of the century. It will play on a continuous loop on North Korean state television.
Yes, in terms of the propaganda of Pyongyang, the existential threat from the United States has long been a staple. We are surrounded, we're threatened, and so this strengthens the hand of the regime at home.
China's foreign ministry on Wednesday said China supports a peaceful resolution to the North Korean matter. In an op-ed piece in the People's Daily, Curtis Stone writes, "The Korean Peninsula is on edge, made more so by words and actions that worsen tensions. Mr. Trump's political chest-thumping is unhelpful. It will only push the DPRK to pursue even riskier policies because the survival of the regime is at stake."
Yes, Trump is throwing fuel on the fire. And to the extent that he threatens the regime is going to double up and continue with its weapons program because they realize that that is the only thing keeping them in the game.
Jeff Kingston said he believes Asian leaders want a cooling down of the rhetoric and pursuit of a policy of both engagement with and pressure on North Korea.
President Trump went on to send a direct message to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, threatening to destroy the Asian nation if the U.S. is forced to defend itself and its allies from a nuclear attack.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary. That's what the United Nations is all about. That's what the United Nations is for. Let's see how they do.
On Donald Trump's staff talking address. Let's go live to United Nations where viewers Margaret Bashir is standing by. Now, Margaret, the president talked about other things, but it looks like his aggressive speech appeared to be aimed directly at the leadership in North Korea, Iran, and Syria, right?
That was a very unambiguous message he sent to the Rocket Man, definitely. Kim Jong-un is on notice.
Yes. Now, in terms of the expectations, you know, there might have been other things that people wanted to hear the president talk about, some of the issues that have been of concern to world leaders. Did that come through besides this?
Well, I think leading up to the speech, usually the first time a U.S. president speaks here, there's a lot of excitement. I've been here for all of President Obama's administration, and people were always really excited to hear from him, especially his first year. It was absolute madness here. But I think this year people were a little anxious about what they might hear from Donald Trump because he's a bit of a wild card, so to speak. And so I think some people will be relieved. He stuck to the teleprompter. He delivered a very presidential, dignified speech. But at the same time, they're going to be a little concerned about some of the content. Threatening to totally destroy another UN member state is strong language indeed. His language on the Iran nuclear deal, calling it a big embarrassment for the United States, hinting that he may not recertify it next month when it comes up for that in the U.S. He could try and pull the U.S. out of that deal. We did not hear from him about climate change. That's a big issue a lot of countries were waiting to hear about. The U.S. has indicated with the new administration that it plans to pull out of the Paris Accord. They're waiting for confirmation of this. There's been some back and forth on it in the last few days in the media here from U.S. officials. So no decision either way from Mr. Trump today on climate change. We didn't hear him criticize Russia. You know, Russia has been a big story in the United States. The Russians meddled in our elections. The president did not criticize Russia. He made a small allusion to the Russians and the Chinese, saying that there's a threat to sovereignty from the Ukraine to the South China Sea. So a little swipe at both Russia and China, but also he thanked them for their support getting economic sanctions against North Korea in the Security Council. So a mixed bag. Also mentioned the crisis in Myanmar that has erupted in the last month with the Rohingya Muslims.
In a few seconds, how about the African leaders? Buhari spoke there, and later on Ellen Johnson. What stood out?
Well, I thought President Buhari still looked a bit weak, not fully recovered, maybe very thin and labored in his speech. He did talk about North Korea, and he suggested that a UN Security Council delegation should go to Pyongyang and talk to Kim Jong-un because this is such a serious crisis. And he also addressed the Myanmar situation. Nigeria has a large Muslim population, and he called for an end to the ethnic cleansing there.
Well, Margaret, thank you very much as always.